Good evening and welcome back to Red Wave USA. My name is Ross Rotz. Very excited to be back with you on this Monday evening. We got a big show for you tonight. A couple of the topics we're going to be talking about tonight include we're going to go over the government shutdown, or rather the government reopening. The Senate advanced the bill. We are past this stage of the filibuster, and we go on to a final vote that will be happening in the near future. We're going to talk a little bit about that, go more into depth regarding that. We're also going to talk about what some are classifying as the Republican Civil War, or the Republican controversy going on in our own party right now. I'm going to get into that a little bit regarding the whole Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson feud, if you will. And lastly, a little bit of good news, which we will wait for the end of the episode to talk about. Again, thank you for watching. I'm very thankful with how we're moving at Red Wave USA here and how we're progressing through the time. So again, I can't thank you enough for your viewership and continued support. Thank you. Monday, November 10th. Happy Monday, if you will, as happy as you can be on a Monday. We have some good news. Finally, we've been reporting on this government shutdown for God knows how long. Basically, the entire time our show's been up, we've been talking about this whole government shutdown and everything that's been going on with that. Finally, we have some headway. We have some changes, and it looks like our government is on pace to open up as early as next week. That's what we're looking at right now. Last night, Sunday night, the Senate convened and they voted to advance the funding bill that had some changes to it. With this advancement, we're going to see a finalizing stage of this bill. The Senate will go through and add or reject certain amendments to the bill, and it will then be sent to the House to approve of those amendments. And after that, it'll be sent to President Trump, and we are looking at an open government. Couldn't be more happy with this, as we've really seen the drawbacks and the negatives that have been going on throughout this entire government shutdown. It's been an absolute clown show. We've seen people struggling. We've seen all sorts of, whether that be federal agents or federal workers struggling, not getting their pay, working without pay. They're going to be back paid. That's in this entire bill. But what exactly made it was 8 Democrats that actually decided to flip to give us that majority, that 60 vote mark we finally hit? It was 8 Democrats that decided to flip. So what exactly was the change? Why have we moved away from this? Remember, we had a majority of, I believe it was 55 to 45. What caused 8 Democrats to suddenly flip away from their leader, Chuck Schumer? What caused this break in the coalition of the Democratic Party? We're going to get into that. So this new funding bill that was passed actually is going to fund the government until January 30th of next year. So we're looking at no government shutdowns in the near future, so we can have a breath of relief there. Part of the reason that Democrats decided to vote for this is, again, it's funded through almost all of January. We're going to fund programs like SNAP, the Department of Agriculture. That's going to be actually funded through September, almost a year long of funding for that. So that was part of it. We're also looking at Veteran Affairs. They're getting funding, as well as the military. They're getting funding all through September of 2026. So almost a full year those will be safeguarded. We will be fully funded on that facet. Also, it's going to guarantee back pay for federal workers that have been working through the shutdown, going to their jobs every day and not getting paid for it. They will be back paid, and we will be caught up on that aspect of things. This bill also introduces a commitment from the Republicans, a commitment from the GOP, that this whole ACA tax credits and this whole thing we've been fighting over, the healthcare premiums and healthcare tax credits, that will be voted on in the month of December. Republican leader John Thune actually wrote this into the bill that it will be mandatory for the Republicans, or we will be allowing the Democrats to bring this issue up again. And this is exactly what I talked about in the beginning of this whole government shutdown, when we were having this fight over these tax credits, over this whole healthcare thing. I said, fund the government. One, that should be your first priority no matter what, is keeping the federal government open. And the second is we will get to it. We will then properly, not through a funding bill, we will properly push this legislation and we will debate it on the Senate floor. Again, that's exactly how our government is supposed to work. We're not supposed to push this legislation through a funding bill. And 8 Democrats agreed with that logic. So now we're looking at having an open government. And again, we will revisit this healthcare issue in December. And again, I can't think of a better deal. How would that not work out for you? But apparently 40 some other Democrats didn't like that deal. But that's fine. All we needed was 8 to push this to a final vote. And I really want to talk about the 8 Democrats that actually voted for this, that decided to step away from their party and open the government for the greater good, right? One of those being John Fetterman. I know we've spoke on him in the past. He was kind of the flagship leader of the Democratic Party, saying this is ridiculous and embarrassing to our party to hold this government hostage. It is time that we open it, right? Other notable Democratic legislators, Tim Kaine, remember him, the VP candidate for Hillary's campaign back in 2016. We also had some other ones, Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, along with Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. And there are a few more. I just wanted to name some of the notable ones and give them a little bit of praise for stepping away from their party. Let's still remember that 40-some Democrats are still okay with the government being shut down. They're still fine with people not receiving federal assistance like SNAP programs. They're fine with that being shut down. They're still okay with federal workers not being paid. They're still okay with all the chaos that this is causing, the chaos that this is causing for the everyday American. Just remember those 40 Democratic legislators that did not want to open the federal government. Let's not let this passing of the funding bill take away from those 40 Democrats that have decided to not want to open our government, right? But anyways, the good news is the government is on pace to be open as early as next week. We, again, have to get through one more vote in the Senate, and that is a finalizing vote. They're going to look at the amendments, add or reject a few amendments, and then they will do another vote, which likely will be passed, since now that we have 8 Democrats on our side to fund the government. That bill will then be passed to the House to go over these new added amendments. And hopefully, if all goes well, the House will pass it without a hitch, and it will be on President Trump's desk, signed, and our government will be back in action. Finally, after the longest government shutdown in history, today is the 40th day. We're going to add a few more, but finally, the Democrats are coming to their senses. Well, it did take a long time for this to happen. Finally, we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, you could say. But anyways, that's about it for the government shutdown. Huge update. Finally, we're getting there, right? But anyways, I also wanted to talk a little bit about our next topic, which is this whole idea of this Republican Civil War that's going on. I recently spoke on the interview that took place between Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, right? Nick Fuentes, obviously being the Israel critique. Some call him an extremist, right? But I don't know. I look at it and I see some of his views as valid. But at the same time, I look at the other side of the Republican Party. You know, you have to have this in politics. That's the whole point of politics, actually, is the debate. You know, you have to have differing opinions. That's the whole point. We're going to sit here and ask questions. But anyways, really what's going on is Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire, a Republican news media outlet, is actually inflamed, I guess you could say, enraged, I guess would be the good word for it, about this, that Tucker Carlson would even host Nick Fuentes, would even give him a platform to speak. And again, this is what comes back to the whole First Amendment thing, right? Should we not be giving platforms to certain people? Anyways, you have two sides of this. Ben Shapiro, in a fiery video or response, took shots at Tucker Carlson, saying that he was a bad friend. He was a backstabber, and multiple other things he claimed in his response video. I'll actually see if I can pull that up and we'll play that in our episode.
Tucker Carlson preys on the friendship he proclaims with others, and then he knifes them directly between the shoulder blades when convenient for him. Tucker Carlson is, in short, a terrible friend. Tucker Carlson was supposedly Charlie Kirk's friend. Charlie believed that Nick Fuentes was vermin. That's a direct quote. He believed that because Nick Fuentes dedicated his life to destroying Charlie Kirk and TPUSA from the inside.
Given what everything Ben Shapiro is pushing forward, Tucker Carlson is just standing there saying, I believe in giving people a platform. I believe everyone has a word within our party. That's day one of the Republican Party, is giving people voices. Remember, we're not the party of cancel culture. That's not us. That's Democrats. So Ben Shapiro pushing this whole thing of cancel culture against Tucker and multiple other members of the Republican media sphere is a little over the top, a little over the edge, if you ask me. Now, obviously, Ben Shapiro is of Jewish origin, and questions about Israel, Republican media members asking these questions about Israel, is completely off the table for him. And we're seeing more and more that he's just willing to cancel anybody that participates in this, whether that be Tucker, whether that be a Nick Fuentes, whether that be Candace Owens even. She had the whole kind of conspiracy theory that Israel was behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. Well, I don't fully agree with that. I still believe that we need to give people platforms. That's the whole point, again, is debating. But this whole question of Israel support and how much America truly is supporting Israel, whether that be financially or whether that be through military support, these questions should be allowed to be asked, and they should be met with answers. This isn't something that can be pushed as anti-Semitic, right? We should be allowed to have conversations regarding how much our country is spending in Israel. We should also be allowed to ask why we are their allies. What is Israel giving us in return? This is the whole point of politics. We should be allowed to critique and ask questions. This shouldn't be off the table. It shouldn't be met with, sayings of you are anti-Semitic if you bring up any questions regarding Israel. And that seems to be the issue right now. It seems that Ben Shapiro is taking any possible, question about Israel as a threat. And he's pushing more and more that anyone that raises these questions are anti-Semitic. And that's where I take issue. I think that is completely and utterly wrong. I feel that we should be able to critique every facet of politics. Even me, sitting here with a Trump hat on my desk, I should be able to critique President Trump and things that he does, legislation he supports. But again, my main point is, where I really stand is that we have the First Amendment in this country. People are allowed to push their views forward, and whether that be in front of a camera or in a civil conversation. Again, we are not the party of censorship. We are not the party of restricting First Amendment access to certain citizens. That's not us. That's a Democratic Party thing. We are for giving people voices, even me, allowed to come on here and talk about my conservative values. That's something we have. That's a right that we have, and that shouldn't be taken. Well, I do say that and say things regarding the First Amendment. Obviously, there is a limit. Obviously, we don't need super extremist views being pushed through our party, and that's something that can be monitored. But at the same time, if someone's just coming to the table asking the questions, whether that be about Israel or something else, that should be welcomed in our party. That should be something that is the basis of our party. We should welcome debate. That's the whole idea of politics. Again, I know I say it a lot, but that's where we stand. We need to push this, that the First Amendment gives people platforms to talk about these things. At least that's the GOP that I grew up on. There was always debate within the party, but it was never canceling and we're throwing these insults at each other and we're just trying to absolutely tear each other down. That should never be the case within our own party. And I think that's a problem right now. That's a big struggle in our party. And I tell you what, it has to be sorted out quickly. It does. But anyways, let's talk about that. Nick Fuentes is not the only person within our party pushing this. We see Tucker has talked about it. He's talked about this whole questioning of Israel thing. He's gone over it. He's been skeptical, which again, should be allowed. Should not cancel each other for that. Even Candace Owens, again, I already brought it up, but she talked about Israel and the ties we have over there. Anyways, to kind of wrap this up, what I'm basically saying is this all needs to wrap up in a sense by the midterms in 2026. We cannot have this inter-party turmoil going on throughout our side of politics while the midterms are going, or it's just going to be a repeat of what these past Tuesday's elections held. Last week. We are going to get throttled in a sense. So this really needs to wrap up. We really need to come together, present a united front within the Republican Party. Otherwise, we're really not going to stand a chance. But again, that's always been an issue for us, is completely standing as a united front, which I don't understand. I mean, you look at the Democrats, they follow each other like sheep. It's the same song and dance every time. You don't see them being critical of their own. When was a single Democrat in the Biden campaign controversial over his state? They never brought any of that up. You look at the Portland riots when that was going on, the whole ICE thing. There was nobody that came out and was controversial over that, at least in the legislature. These people in the legislature as Democrats are your leaders of the Democratic Party. And they said nothing about that matter because they're always presenting a united front. No matter what, they're always going to stick together. No matter what topic it is. And I don't understand why us as Republicans can't do the same. Why can't we present a united front? But anyways, I just want to make an emphasis on the point that this has to be done. This whole inter-party turmoil and us going at each other's throats, this really has to end by 2026. But that's where we're different in this side of politics as a Republican. We're different because we can be critical of our own. Even me, I can be critical. For a fact, I can have this hat sitting here on my desk and I can still be critical of Trump. I get called a Trump loyalist all the time on social media, and that's fine. Look at it how you want, but I can still be critical about Trump on certain policies. I'm allowed to do that as a Republican, and we can actually do that. As Democrats, you guys have to blindly follow whatever they're saying. And I know you accuse me of the same, but in reality, that's what goes on throughout the Democratic Party. They stick together no matter what topic it is. Over here on the right side of things, we're critical of each other. And while that can be a positive, it's not going to be a positive come the midterm elections. But for us to see that red wave like we did in 2024, we're going to have to come together. And that's kind of my whole wrapping up of this, is that in order for that red wave to take place, we're going to have to present a united front, just like the Democrats do. And my last little update, or rather good news tidbit of the day, I try and end each episode with a little good news story to, kind of drown out everything that's going on in politics, even though there are some good things going on in politics right now, for the Republicans at least. Trump announced recently that he will be paying a $2,000 dividend from the tariffs to lower to middle income individuals within the United States. And this comes from a profit, he says, from the tariffs that he imposed back in the beginning of his term. And again, I bring good news as someone who's not within the wealthy 1% of people in America. I believe a $2,000 dividend or, stimulus check in a sense would help me out greatly. So again, if you want to look at that as good news, that these tariffs that Trump put in place are actually working, then yeah, sure. Be happy about it. I sure am. Well, this is still developing news. We don't have all the details on how this whole $2,000 dividend is going to work, but in a sense, this is Trump saying, hey, the tariffs that the left criticized so much, they're working. But anyways, you could almost look at this as like, hey, here's your kind of stimulus check for the government being shut down for 40 days, even though it was the Democrats' fault. I know everyone's been struggling a little bit, so here you go, in a sense, right? Trump also stated that the remains after everyone has received their stimulus check, if you want to call it that, will be used to lower the national debt. So there's another positive. Try and refute that one, liberals. But anyways, just want to end the episode off with a rather good piece of news, if you want to look at it that way. Tariffs are working. The Trump administration is working, right? But anyways, that is it from me, and that is it from Red Wave USA on this Monday. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'd like to say again, thank you for all the support that we're getting, both positive and negative. You know what? Even the negative comments, I enjoy it. I enjoy responding to them. I enjoy responding to the civil ones, rather. I don't, there's the civil Democrats that want to talk about policy, which I'm all for. Yeah, sure. Let's debate. I'm all for that. And then there's the far left who is just going to attack your character. Again, I'm a strong-willed man. Come at me. I don't really care. I'll sit there and laugh at your attempt to belittle me, in a sense. Whatever comment that may be. I'm not going to give you much light, but I find it funny. I have a little laugh that my video pressed you so much to the point where you had to come up with something demeaning my character. That's fine. It doesn't bother me one bit. I know you hope it bothers me, or rather pushes me to a point where I don't upload things like this anymore, but that's where you're wrong. It actually fuels me. When you post these things that are just, absolutely tearing down my character, whatever insult that may be, it actually pushes me to do more of this because I know it's working. I know that my conservative values are getting put onto your feed. I know that you're seeing them as a Democrat and getting pressed by it. That's fine. But the more you see it, the more you hear it, maybe it'll resonate. Who knows? But just wanted to point that one out, that all the negativity fuels me to keep this going. But anyways, thank you so much for the support. I can't thank you enough. That's what keeps this entire show going. It's what keeps, my drive to do this more and more. So thank you again. Again, my name is Ross Rotz. This is Red Wave USA. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week.